We are back now with Senator Barack Obama. Senator, one of the central themes of your campaign is that you are a uniter who will reach across the aisle and create a new kind of politics. Some of your detractors say that you are a paint-by-the-numbers liberal, and I'd like to explore this with you.
Right.
Over the years, John McCain has broken with his party and risked his career on a number of issues: campaign finance, immigration reform, banning torture. As a president, can you name a hot-button issue where you would be willing to buck the Democratic Party line and say, you know what, Republicans have a better idea here?
Well, I think there are a whole host of areas where Republicans, in some cases, may have a better idea.
Such as?
Well, on issues of regulation. I think that back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of the way we regulated industry was top-down, command and control. We're going to tell businesses exactly how to do things. And I think that the Republican Party and people who thought about the markets came up with the notion that, you know what, if you simply set some guidelines, some rules, and incentives for businesses, let them figure out how they're going to, for example, reduce pollution. And a cap-and-trade system, for example, is a smarter way of doing it, controlling pollution, than dictating every single rule that a company has to abide by, which creates a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and oftentimes is less efficient. I think that on issues of education, I've been very clear about the fact, and sometimes I've gotten in trouble with the teachers union on this, that we should be experimenting with charter schools. We should be experimenting with different ways of compensating teachers.
You mean merit pay?
Well, the merit pay, the way it's been designed, I think that is based on just a single standardized test, I think is a big mistake, because the way we measure performance may be skewed by whether or not the kids are coming into school already 3 years or 4 years behind. But I think that having assessment tools and then saying, you know what, teachers who are on career paths to become better teachers, developing themselves professionally, that we should pay excellence more. I think that's a good idea.
But Senator, if I may, yeah, I think one of the concerns that some people have is that you talk a good game about let's be post-partisan, let's all come together. Just a couple of quick things, and I don't really want you to defend each one. I just want to speak to the larger issue. The Gang of 14, which was a group of bipartisan coalition to try to resolve the issue of judicial nominations. 14 senators came together. You weren't part of it. On some issues where Democrats have moved to the center, partial birth abortion, Defense of Marriage Act, you stay on the left and you are against both. And so people say, do you really want a partnership with Republicans, or do you really want unconditional surrender from them?
No, look, I think this is fair. I would point out, though, for example, that when I voted for a tort reform measure that was fiercely opposed by the trial lawyers, I got attacked pretty hard from the left during that the Roberts.
John Roberts
nomination. Although I voted against him, I strongly defended some of my colleagues who had voted for him on the Daily Kos, and was fiercely attacked as somebody who is, caving into to Republicans on these fights. In fact, there are a lot of liberal commentators who think I'm too accommodating. So here's my philosophy. I want to do what works for the American people, and both at the state legislative level and at the federal legislative level. I have always been able to work together with Republicans to find compromise and to find common ground. That's how I was able to provide health care for people who needed it in Illinois. That's how I passed ethics reform both at the state and the federal level. That's how I've worked with people like Dick Lugar from here in Indiana on critical issues like nuclear proliferation. It is true that when you look at some of the votes that I've taken in the Senate, that I'm on the Democratic side of these votes, but part of the reason is because the way these issues are designed are to polarize. They're intentionally designed to polarize. On an issue like partial birth abortion, I strongly believe that the state can properly restrict late-term abortions. I have said so repeatedly. All I've said is we should have a provision to protect the health of the mother. And many of the bills that came before me didn't have that. Now, part of the reason they didn't have it was purposeful, because those who are opposed to abortion, I don't begrudge that at all. They have a moral calling to try to oppose what they think is immoral. Oftentimes what they were trying to do was to polarize the debate and make it more difficult for people so that they could try to bring an end to abortions overall. So the point I'm simply making is that as president, my goal is to bring people together, to listen to them, and I don't think there's any Republican out there who I've worked with who would say that I don't listen to them, I don't respect their ideas, I don't understand their perspective, and I do not consider Democrats to have a monopoly on wisdom. And my goal is to get us out of this polarizing debate where we're always trying to score cheap political points and actually get things done.
I want to ask you about one more area during this segment, tax and spending. The Republicans are keeping a running total of all your plans. They say it's $662 billion over 4 years. Right. They say for all your promises not to raise taxes on the middle class, that in fact you want to raise the cap on the Social Security payroll tax, and you also want to increase capital gains. Question. John McCain is going to go after you as another classic liberal tax and spender.
Well, I'm going to go right back at John McCain because look at his tax proposals. He just went out there and not only wants to continue some of the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans and corporations, he actually wants to extend them, and he hasn't told us really how he's going to pay for them. It is irresponsible, and the irony is he said it was irresponsible. When George Bush initiated these tax cuts in 2001, he said this is shameful. He said that it offended his conscience. He said for us to give tax breaks to the wealthy, particularly at a time of war. Well, somewhere along the line, his conscience took flight because he was looking to get nominated for the Republican as the Republican nominee. And so I'm happy to have that debate. If you look at my approach to taxation, what have I said? I said I would cut taxes for people making $75,000 a year or less. I'd cut taxes for seniors who are making $50,000 a year or less. It is true that I would roll back the Bush tax cuts on the wealthiest Americans back to the level they were under Bill Clinton, when I don't remember rich people feeling oppressed. In terms of capital gains, I've suggested we might go back up to 20. We might, because
you suggested 28.
Well, what I've said is I certainly would not raise it higher than it was under Ronald Reagan. But the fact is that I'm mindful that we've got to keep our capital gains tax to a point where we can actually get more revenue. But that's not something that's going to affect the average person with a 401k. When people start talking about how, well, there are millions of Americans who own stock, most of them own stock in 401ks where their taxes are deferred and they pay ordinary income taxes when they finally cash out. And in terms of raising the payroll tax, raising the cap on the payroll tax, right now everybody who's making $102,000 or less pays 100% payroll tax on 100% of their income. There are about 3 to 4% of Americans who are above $102,000 in income every year. So if you want to talk about who's middle class, me giving cuts to folks making $60,000, $70,000 and potentially asking more from friends of mine like Warren Buffett, who I have no idea what he made last year, that's a debate I'm happy to have with John McCain, because it's the people making $75,000, $50,000, $60,000 who are hurting. And when John McCain promises tax cuts to corporations that are not paid for, then what we are doing is loading up this nation with debt, and if we're not paying for it now, our kids and our grandkids are going to have to pay for it, and I think that's objectionable.
Senator, we have to take one more break, but when we come back, we'll ask Barack Obama some questions about foreign policy and also how he thinks this law